Guys, today a full Furina guide where I go over gameplay, best teams, best builds, and so on. Let's go. First of all, Furina is obviously one of the best characters in the game because of how strong she is as a baseline and also because of how many teams she can fit in. However, compared to somebody like Nahida that I would say is on the same tier of excellence but pretty straightforward to use, Furina is much more complex and more diversified in the ways she can excel. And for this reason, it's good to understand all the intricacies about her so you can make the most out of her kit. Just to summarize how she works, Furina's main way of dealing damage is her elemental skill. The skill will summon 3 Hydro Pets that will deal damage over time unconditionally. By this I mean that unlike characters like Xingqiu or Yelan that in order for their damage effects to be triggered, they need the active character to specifically use normal attacks, Furina's damage is completely autonomous. Not only that, but the skill will also last for 30 seconds with a cooldown of 20 seconds, and the pets will follow you around the field. These pets will deal damage independently, and each of them has specific multipliers, application, and attack frequency. Moreover, whenever they launch an attack, they will drain a specific amount of HP from all the characters on the team that have their current health above 50%. And depending on how many characters a certain attack has drained HP from, it will get a multiplicative damage increase which can get very high. All in all, I would say that considering her total damage output and the flexibility of her elemental skill, Furina is definitely ahead of her competition in this specific aspect. On the flip side, her application can be below expectations. Compared to somebody like Yelan, she applies Hydra at a slower and more irregular rate. The problem are the rather lengthy intervals between one attack and the other from the pets. The frequency is just not there compared to Xingqiu or Yelan, and this makes Furina kinda worse at supporting elemental reactions within a certain time window. Specifically, characters like Ling that have very fast pyro application are more likely to make Furina vape than the other way around. This is not necessarily bad, because as I said earlier, damage is pretty great, so if you can make it vape, of course it becomes even better, but it can be a problem if you want her to do the same exact things Xingqiu and Yelan can do. But I'll leave this for later when I talk teams more in depth. Now the second part of her kit, her elemental burst. The burst, for a total duration of 18 seconds, will get stacks whenever the characters on your team lose or gain HP. These stacks will give healing and damage bonuses to all the characters on the team, capping at 300 where you will get a 75% damage bonus total, which is honestly mind-boggling to me. The stacks it gets are equal to the percentage of HP a character loses or gains at a specific point. So for example, if a character with 20,000 total HP heals by 10,000, the burst will gain 50 stacks because the character healed by 50% of its HP. Meanwhile, if a character with 50,000 HP heals by the same amount, you will only get 20 stacks because 10,000 is 20% of 50,000. It's worth mentioning that things like healing surplus won't count for the stacks generation. The only thing that matters is how much the current HP changes, so if you heal a character while it's at full HP, you won't get any stacks. On the flip side, when this happens, Furina will launch a team-wide healing effect that will last for a few seconds and help with the generation of more stacks eventually. It's good to have some kind of team-wide healing effect like this on Furina teams because remember, her elemental skill will continuously drain HP from the whole team. Of course, that drain counts for the generation of more stacks for the burst, but it stops if the character is at 50% HP or below. And that's why team-wide healers like Baiju, Jin, Xianyun are so good with Furina because they manage to keep characters' HP well above 50% consistently, which both maximizes the strength of Furina's elemental skill and the generation of stacks for the burst. These characters can typically heal the whole team before the main DPS even comes into the field, which means you can get a lot of damage bonus before the main DPS window start. In contrast, single target healers like Bennett or Cookie are much less front-loaded in the way they heal, and they're also penalized by the fact they can only heal one character at a time. As such, they find themselves relying on Furina's team-wide healing passive much more than other healers, and they end up contributing to the generation of fewer stacks for the whole team. However, to counterbalance this, the great single target healers bring more offensive benefits than most team-wide healers do. For example, Bennett 3's attack buffs or Cookie by being a good hyper boom trigger. As a result, the partnership of these characters with Furina still ends up being very strong. It's worth mentioning that Furina herself can become a full-fledged healer for the team. In fact, when she uses her charge attack, she changes alignment and her elemental skill turns from a damage tool to a healing tool. However, these heals are only a single target and for the active character, which means that they're not great for generating stacks for the burst, and besides, this version of the elemental skill generates no particles for Furina, which means that she won't be getting enough energy back to use the burst again anyway. Now let's talk about their teams, but first let me remind you that if you enjoy my channel but you haven't subbed yet, please consider doing so because it really makes me notice your support, and also go check the Wuthering Waves channel. So teams wise, there is obviously a lot to unpack here. Back when she came out, I considered her to be the most revolutionary character to ever drop in the game, which makes sense because she's French after all. The reason I believe this is that she made healers that were conventionally believed to be bad offensively much more important in that sense. With Furina on team, these healers gain the responsibility to enable the kind of damage bonuses that can get so high that at the current state of the game, they're simply unmatched in terms of what a single unit can do. This allowed for the creation of teams with strong team-wide healers that could still be very powerful offensively, and as a result, teams that could be comfy to use but still powerful enough to compete with the rest of the meta. For example, the double Hydro Core with Furina with either Yelan or Xingqiu basically replaced the older double Hydro Core that featured both Yelan and Xingqiu together. By adding a team-wide healer and a main DPS here, you're making a team that can easily dish out enough damage to clear any type of content in the game. The most popular composition of this kind is probably Raiden double Hydro with Jean. That's because Raiden comes with full interruption resistance and energy regeneration for the whole team, so she makes the team extra comfy. I wouldn't say this is the strongest Raiden team in terms of damage, but considering the ease of use it has, it doesn't surprise me that some people consider it the best overall. One thing I suggest you to do here is to use Raiden's skill right before you come in with Jean to swirl and heal the whole team. The reason is that there is so much Hydro application here that if you use the skill at the start of the rotation, the Electro Aura can easily end up being eaten up. Meanwhile, if you use it right before Jean comes on field, you will ensure that she will swirl Electro on at least one opponent. Anyway, being on team with other Hydro characters really benefits Furina herself. She gets Hydro Resonance, which is great because she scales off HP, and also more Hydro Particles to get, which lowers her energy requirements of course. All of this makes her even more powerful offensively, and in combination with Yelan, they make an incredibly strong sub-DPS duo. The ultimate version of this is probably Mono Hydro with Kokomi. Kokomi is a peculiar case because she's a main carry that can also heal the whole team through her burst. This allows you to dedicate the 4th slot to a character that isn't a team-wide healer, and for example you can add a support like Kazuha. Clearly Kokomi can deal main DPS type of damage, but Furina and Yelan get so many benefits in this situation that this composition ends up being one of the great teams in Genshin. Speaking more in general, main carries that can heal the team in some way have huge potential with Furina. Among them, Noelle and Dori became some of the strongest forces in the game for this reason. Unfortunately, both of them need their Constellation 6 for this playstyle to function, but I have to say that they really found a new youth with Furina. Specifically for Dori Quick Bloom teams, I think it's pretty underrated how Dori can arguably compete with 5-star carries when it comes to driving in Quick Bloom. For Noelle, typically Geo-based teams that can allow her own DPS to shine. To expand on this topic, I would say the more a healer can do on a team, the stronger Furina becomes. For example, Charlotte, that other than healing well, she's also a very good second cryo slot on Freed's teams with a main DPS like Breezely or Ayaka. And so you can run Charlotte, Furina, Kazuha and the main DPS that feels quite smooth to use. For Ayaka in particular, I like this composition a lot because it lowers her responsibilities as the damage dealer of the team. On most of her other teams, she's typically the only one dealing damage, which can make the gameplay inconsistent because Ayaka herself struggles with consistency. Meanwhile, in the Furina comp, Furina being a quite good sub-DPS takes away some of that responsibility from Ayaka, which is great. Another example is Baiju, because alongside Furina you can open the door for some pretty interesting Quick Bloom teams. Specifically, Cyno, Nahida, Furina and Baiju is the best Quick Bloom team for Cyno for various reasons. 1. It has the best damage. Pretty simple. 2. Both Furina and Baiju can keep their effects up in multi-wave just fine. Nahida struggles with this because her effects can only stay up for as long as the opponent she marked stay alive, but Furina and Baiju are different. This makes Cyno retain more support when he's facing multiple waves of opponents. So overall, I really like the team for him. Mika is another good one because other than healing the whole team, he also provides unconditional attack speed bonuses. So characters that can hugely benefit from attack bonus like Wanderer can integrate the Furina-Mika duo rather well. Of course, Mika is also a massive physical damage buffer, which is why a character like Eula was able to improve her dire situation when Furina came out. Now, among all of these healers, there is one that is just the pinnacle example of someone that is designed to work around Furina, and that is Xianyun. Xianyun is a team-wide healer that provides the kind of offensive buffs that you would only expect from a non-healer. The catch is that they're only for plunge teams that, however, she enables. Long story short, Furina and Xianyun make one of the strongest offensive cores in the game, and it propelled characters like Xiao or Diluc to have a place of relevance again in the meta. And the interesting part about these plunge teams is that they are some of the few compositions where Furina's Hydro application is good enough to allow a Pyro carry to consistently trigger Vaporizes. That's because plunge attacks are slower compared to Shenling's Pyronado or Huta's Charge Attack spam playstyle, and so even though Furina's Hydro application is not the best, it fits well here. This enabled plenty of incredible vape teams like Gaming Plunge Vape, Huto Plunge Vape, and so on. As a whole, I would say that Xianyun is the perfect example of how good an offensive healer can be with Furina, and that's why Bennett is also great with Furina. The concept of Bennett-Furina teams is pretty simple. Take any Bennett team, replace the weakest link with Furina, and you're done. Of course, when it comes to healing, Bennett is not as good as Xianyun or Jean, because he can only heal one target at a time, but on the flip side, his buffing is much more versatile. And despite Bennett not being the best healer for Furina, she usually makes his best team. teams, because she's just that good, I guess. For example, the Wanderer team with Ferozan, Bennett and Furina is the best Wanderer team, period. Frizzly double Pyro with Furina is the best Frizzly team, Linea double Pyro with Kazuha and Furina makes a great case as the best Linea team, and so on. With Bennett on team, the rotations are a bit different compared to other Furina teams. Since Bennett can only heal the active character, sometimes it can be useful to switch in the other supports of the team right after he uses burst and not before, because this way you can heal them and generate more stacks. For example, on the Wanderer team I'm talking about, it's good to use Ferozan's abilities after you use Bennett's and not before. Anyway, one of the most interesting parts about Bennett here is that he facilitates Pyro-centered teams rather well, and Furina synergizes with these teams quite uniquely. In fact, on many of these teams that have a Pyro main DPS, Furina's Hydro application is not fast enough to allow the main DPS to vape, but on the flip side, she herself ends up vaping. This becomes the case whenever you use a fast Pyro applier like Shelling, for example. While in this scenario, it would be probably better if Furina allowed Shelling to vape like a character like Xingqiu can do. This trade-off is not exactly bad, and ultimately it makes Furina a viable option on all kinds of Pyro teams. But even then it depends, because when she's paired with slower Pyro appliers like Line, Arlecchino, Yoimiya, Furina's application can still be good enough to allow them to vape instead. This becomes especially true if you use a character like Kazuha on her teams, because Kazuha can absorb Hydro through his burst and contribute to the Hydro application to make the Pyro vapes even more consistent. This team has some of the highest offensive ceiling you could potentially imagine, and it kinda goes without saying, because after all you're using 3 of the best supports in the game, if not the 3 best. The only difficulty here is whirling Pyro, and this can really make your DPS vary. Specifically, after you use Furina's skill and burst and then Kazuha burst, you have a lot of Hydro being applied, and the window to swirl Pyro before your main DPS goes on field becomes very minimal. This window only happens when you use Bennett's burst and you go in with Kazuha again that you have Pyro applied on him thanks to the Bennett burst. This will allow Kazuha to use a Pyro infused skill which will swirl Pyro if the opponent doesn't have Hydro applied on him at the moment the skill hits him. This can be pretty random because Furina's Hydro application is quite irregular and also a bit ping dependent, so you have to find your own timing. Generally, wasting like a second before using Bennett's burst has worked for me, but I don't know if it will work for you, honestly. But the upside if you manage to make it work is the arguable strongest offensive core in the game. On a side note, Furina obviously has incredible synergy with all those characters that can manipulate their own HP in some way. So characters like Line, Neuvillette, Frizzly that can sacrifice their own HP and heal it back to generate more stacks for Furina are obviously great with her. This more so helps when you have a single target healer like Bennett on team, because it gives a much needed increase to the amount of stacks you can realistically get. And this is great for Frizzly and Line in particular because their best teams have Bennett in them. In the most extreme cases like a Neuvillette that can generate around 80 stacks every charge attack, you don't even need to bring a dedicated healer on team. This allows you to use a more offensive core of Zhongli and Kazuha, which maximizes the damage of both Furina and Neuvillette. Also, Furina providing healing bonuses increases the healing of this character. This has proven to be useful most recently with Cloran that can't be healed by other characters, but in return she can heal herself, and with Furina on team she will heal double the amount. So it's a lot of different synergies that overall make Furina one of the most diverse characters we have in the game. And it doesn't even end here, because Furina draining HP from the active character allows him to use the Mana Shusei set. This set gives crit rate bonuses each time the HP values of the active holder change, and Furina obviously enables this by herself. Just to summarize, this set is at least a very competitive option on all the main DPS that can fit on Furina teams, and in many cases it's straight up the best one available. This is quite convenient, because it means that you can basically share the same set on all the main DPS that go on Furina teams. So, TLDR, this character is just all over the meta of Genshin right now. Now, in terms of builds, for the artifacts she gets the Golden Troop set that usually buffs elemental skill damage, which is obviously the focus of her kit. Golden Troop is always the best choice for her personal damage, with alternatives being mixes of HP %, damage bonus %, but never even close to the Golden Troop. The more interesting part about her artifacts are the stats you need to build for, and the most important one is energy recharge. Her elemental burst is essential for her to work on a team, so you want to use it every rotation and right on time. For this purpose, her requirements kind of depend on the team she's on. Typically, they never go below 170% on a team that doesn't feature a second Hydro unit. They can even surpass 200% if the team particle generation per rotation is not the highest. Meanwhile, with a second Hydron team, the requirements get significantly lower, and on a Neuvillette team, they can even get close to 0 because the rotations are quite long there. Note that the duration of the rotation matters here because her elemental skill can last for up to 30 seconds without her needing to recast it. The skill will steadily generate Hydro particles for those 30 seconds, which means that the longer the rotation is, the more the particles Furina can generate for herself. And while in a way this style of particle generation is quite good, on the other hand it can also be bad. Specifically, unlike Ilan or Sincho, she can't generate a lot of hydro particles in a single instance. This becomes a problem if your rotation gets cut short, like for example if you finish an Abyss room before finishing your rotation. The result is that starting next room, Furina won't have enough energy and also won't have any easy way to recover it. So for this reason I think it's always good to over-invest on energy recharge with Furina. For the rest, in terms of stats steal, she really likes HP, to the point that she even prefers an HP goblet to a damage bonus goblet most of the time. This is partially because she gets so much damage bonus from things like Golden Troop or her own kit, and so HP percent becomes more valuable. Damage bonus can become more competitive if your team has Hydro Resonance and Furina is holding an HP weapon, but otherwise no. Weapons wise, she has a lot of options, with her signature obviously being the best one in terms of personal damage for her. Yori's signature and Primordial Jade Cutter are also pretty great, but the thing is she has a very good free-to-play option in Festering Desire. But it's an event weapon, so you might not have it. I don't have it. For some mysterious but sure enough ill-intent motive, Oyvers won't put this goddamn weapon in some kind of free-to-play shop, so we that weren't able to get them for whatever reason can't ever get them. Okay, rant over, but I'm still pissed. Anyway, for the energy issues I mentioned before, weapons like Favonius, Flevcendre, Festering Desire become even more useful than what's depicted in this graph. So even though they're technically worse in terms of damage, I consider them to be just as useful as her signature for that reason. Key of Kejnisut can also be better than it is on this graph, specifically on teams that benefit from the team-wide elemental mastery it provides. For example, Vape teams. In those situations, it becomes a much more competitive option. Now, for Constellations, I think Furina has the best Constellations 1 and 2 in the game, period. The Constellation 1 makes the burst give more stacks right away and also increases the cap of the stacks. Practically, this means that you get more damage bonus faster and more damage bonus total, and this is around a 12% raw damage increase for the whole team. The Constellation 2 makes Furina gain stacks more than 3 times as fast, and also makes the overcapping stacks give Furina HP bonuses. In simple terms, Furina's burst will now reach max stacks extremely easily regardless of which healing tool you use. This is very useful for single target healers specifically that usually struggle mightily to achieve that. And even for team-wide healers it's pretty great, because the HP bonuses Furina gets from overcapping stacks can make her damage skyrocket. So it's a Constellation meant to make her piece easy to use, and also much stronger of course. Then after this, I don't really like to talk about the super high Constellations because they're pretty deep wheel territory and I haven't experienced that myself, but I will tell you that the Constellation 4 is useful because it gives her a pretty big energy refund which solves her energy issues kind of. And with this, I'm done for today. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe and also go check the current guide I made a few days ago. Bye bye.